Hey everybody, it's Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich. Thought I'd take time to talk about the tropics today because we've got two tropical systems out there and people are starting to get a little antsy because we're getting towards that time of the year where we start to get a little more concerned about the tropics and we're off to a record start. So clearly we got to start keeping an eye on the tropics here as we go into August. But I'll tell you, both of these systems, the first is, which is down here, is a tropical storm Gonzalo, which will become our first hurricane probably some point over the next couple of days. And then we have Tropical Depression 8, which is going to become Tropical Storm Hanna. So remember, that's the 7th and 8th named storm. Those are all records. We're shattering records for the earliest formation of these storms, the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th storm of the season, and those names. So we're way ahead of schedule. But both of these systems aren't necessarily a big concern. I'm going to start with Gonzalo first because it's way out there. It's probably the least of our concerns. The first thing you notice, it's pretty far to the south. So in general, when storms are that far south, we don't get concerned, especially here in the southeast and the Carolinas. Also notice you can see that dry air layer, that SAL we call it. So it's struggling a little bit to fight off that dry air. There's actually dust around it. And as you know, that dust deters hurricanes. Now, in some cases, when hurricanes or tropical systems can form quickly and maintain a nice core, they can insulate themselves from that rough environment. But it's hard to say if that's going to happen. There's also some wind shear ahead of it. So remember, warm water temperatures get way too much publicity. They're important, trust me. Warm water is the fuel for tropical systems. But if you have wind shear or dry air, that warm water is meaningless. So it's just not about warm water. Just because we have a swirl over warm water doesn't mean we're going to get a tropical system. In this case, the reason Gonzalo is struggling, lots of dry air and wind shear. So even if it survives, it's still probably going to weaken at some point. Of a more immediate threat, and really, I'm going to tell you why this isn't that big of a deal. In the Gulf of Mexico, always an area we watch. That's a bathtub, always ripe for big development. We've got what is going to become Tropical Storm Hanna. Now, it's moving to the northwest and is probably going to move into Texas here over the next couple of days. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, and I'm going to show you why. Texas is having a drought. So very dry conditions in Texas. So we don't want to see flooding. We don't want too much rain at one time. But the fact that there's very dry conditions, most people in Texas will welcome a weak tropical system. It actually will help out quite a bit. So let's take a closer look at Gonzalo. You can see its core is falling apart a little bit this morning, which is not going to bode well with that dry air getting entrained or pulled into it. So this is something to watch. We could see Gonzalo weaken real quickly or ramp back up. If it doesn't maintain that core, one of the things about small tropical systems also, they can intensify quickly, but they can weaken quickly. So that's something to watch today. I would not be shocked if a weakening trend is detected and it doesn't really maintain itself for a while. There's actually a lot of guidance is showing it weakening into an open wave at some point. Let's show you the wider view. Again, both of the systems showing up, and this is another clear view where you can see that dust around Gonzalo and why it's probably not a big deal. Let's look at some of the forecast guidance. I love looking at the forecast cones of the ensemble models. So you're looking at basically ensembles of the European and the GFS. The GFS does bring Gonzalo at some point into the Gulf, but here's the thing. Dry air here eats it up, and if it goes over the big islands of the Caribbean, that would kill it. So who knows what's left by the time it gets there. I love the track density for these. This is the GFS showing a pretty consistent path there, and this is the European, which actually shows it dissipating. So the fact that there's dry air today and wind shear, I think the European model's picking up on that and dissipating it, and there's Hanna going into Texas. So pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of ambiguity on this. I think we all have a pretty good idea on where the storms are going. I think the bigger question is intensity-wise. I'll show you a couple of the spreads here. There's Gonzalo in the GFS. Here is Hanna, and then I'll show you the same thing for the Euro. So we know this thing's going to Texas, and Gonzalo, you can see how a lot of the ensemble members for the European kind of move it, and then only a couple have it in here. So it actually shows it dissipating here in the Caribbean. So that's, like I said, something to watch. And the fact that we're seeing this morning, I think the European might be on to something. So let's show you the steering currents because everyone in the Carolinas has been asking me, Brad, is this coming our way? I will never say never. There's never a 0 or 100% in weather. But I will tell you the fact that we've got this giant ridge oriented like this means anything down here is going this way. It's going to be hard to get something to come up here with this ridge above us. And even if we go into the future, I'll show you over time, there's not a lot of breaks in that ridge. It's pretty strong. There's Hanna and there's Gonzalo. We'll go through time, and there's just not a lot of mechanisms to push this thing to the northwest. There's no big trough, or the ridge isn't sinking down here, forcing them. I always would look for weakening over the Carolinas, somewhere in here where the high is here. We've got a high here, and that would pull it up there, but that just doesn't look likely at this point. I just don't see that happening. So as we go through time, it just looks like this is gonna kind of dissipate and the ridge is gonna win out. So we'll keep an eye on it long term, but overall, I am not overly concerned with either of these systems right now for the Carolinas. Our bigger concern today will probably be some strong or severe thunderstorms like we've seen the last couple of days here in the Carolinas. But for these two tropical systems, these are likely not ones that are going to impact us. But it's always a good idea to stay weather aware. We're going into the height of the season. And as we get into August and especially September and October, those are the 3 months where we have the most to keep an eye on as far as the tropics are concerned.